Harrison Price for Wednesday, January 15th, 2025. Joining you from the Nation Network studio, built by Arbor Lee here at the Historic Well Center in Harrison Price, a presentation of Bet365. Open an account with Bet365 today, bet on a huge range of markets. So, whatever the moment, it's never ordinary at Bet365. Use code NATION. Very important. Use code NATION when opening that account. Matt Sikerson alongside Blake Price. Four-time Juno Award winner Mike Rogerson hitting switches, conducting things alongside Coach Nick Hauka. We got a big show coming up for you.
We do indeed.
So text a buddy. 5 o'clock start, happy hour. Gonna hit up the local for a pint. Watch at least a period, maybe two. 3-0, he goes, barkeep, I'll take my check. One period. Wow. What an evening in Winnipeg for the Vancouver Canucks. We will get to that in a moment, but first, we actually have a couple of Surrey Mitsubishi poll questions running at Harrison Price on the X and YouTube channels. How do you feel about the Canucks season? Anger? Disappointment? That doesn't capture your emotion. There's an other vote there. Please specify in reply. Also asking you, are you confident the Canucks will make the playoffs? You can vote on that one as well. Start with the second one with you.
I mean, I've been yes up until last night, and not the last night changes things mathematically. It changes things from the nebulous confidence category. It was really bad. It was really bad. Zero pushback, zero personality in that game. And now the really profoundly bad performances are starting to outnumber any of the inspirational performances. Like now the win versus the Leafs is not only offset immediately by this game, it's kind of drowned out by everything else in the last couple of weeks as well. Mm-hmm. The good performances are few and far between.
Oh, I like how J-Pat phrased it on Rinkwide last night. No show up, no give a damn.
Yeah.
And that's so very concerning. And, yeah, I mean, the trend continues. You get a good win, and then you just, I don't know. Do they feel like when they get a good win, that's worth 2 wins? That they don't even have to show up for the next game?
It sort of feels that way.
We were so bloody good. Guess what?
We don't have to do that for a week.
Exactly. The other team is going to look at that and go, wow, were they pretty good? We'll just lay down and lose here. I'm still yes. I wrote tepid yes. Skridler's giving me grief, going, kind of a contradiction. Are you confident? Yeah, tepidly.
Yeah, that's it's true.
No, but I'm not overwhelmed. My confidence is not overwhelming, but I'm still yes. Mm-hmm. I just think they're better than Calgary and St. Louis. And I think now that they're getting healthier on talent and, frankly, goaltending alone, I think they're going to get there.
Eventually,
Calgary is so reliant on Dustin Wolf. Mm-hmm. And our friends over at Barn Burner, I was talking to Ryan Pinder this week, he's pushing Wolf as a Calder winner. And honestly, if Calgary makes the playoffs, he probably should win the Calder Trophy, regardless of what Macklin Celebrini or Lane Hudson or Michkov do. And boy, what a class of rookies this year, huh? Indeed. It's just awesome. Love it when the new talent comes in the league. But they're so reliant on the rookie goaltender. We'll see how he does in the second half of the season because the rookie wall could absolutely be a thing there. They're missing Connor Zary now for a team that doesn't score a lot of goals to begin with. So I would not be the least bit surprised if Calgary fades from here. St. Louis has some depth. They don't have a lot of star power.
Nope.
I just think the Canucks are better than them. And as we've discussed earlier in the week, like Utah Utah could be sneaky because they, young guys like Cooley, who are presumably getting better. Too bad Dylan Gunther's out. He's a big loss for them because they, Lawson Krause isn't having a great year. They need Gunther's goal scoring. But they got John Marino back. They're getting Sean Dursey back. And then they have a whole cache of prospects and draft picks. And the word around the NHL campfire is that with the new owner there in Utah, that the GM, Bill Armstrong, is going to get busy and make some deadline additions. So maybe there's an outside, path for Utah to nip Vancouver or whomever at the line. But I still like the Canucks' chances here. I voted yes.
And intrinsically, I get what you're saying, but eventually the Denny Green rule takes over, right? And you just are what your record is, no matter what you think you are.
It's the Bill Parcells rule. You are what your record is. Denny Green's rule is they are who we thought they were.
You want to crown them. You're right. Apologies. He's a nose. They aren't. This is the anti-Danny Green.
Let him off the hook.
This team is not who we thought they were.
No, exactly. I voted disappointment on the other poll, and here's why. I have had and still have a very high opinion of the managerial work of Patrick Allvin, his staff, Jim Rutherford. Here in Vancouver, they have done exceptional work. I am disappointed that this management group didn't get ahead of the JT Elias thing.
Or salvage it.
Because, they still could. We have not reached the conclusion on that matter, so we'll see.
No, but you're leaving it so late to salvage the season.
Well, and they may have to make one of those moves to salvage the season. Got a good tweet about that we're going to get to in the body of this block. So, but disappointed they didn't get ahead of that. Also disappointed in the roster construction. The failure to see that you needed more mobility, more puck transportation with that defense group. I think they got a little drunk on wingers in the offseason. Danton Heinen and Daniel Sprong struck me as superfluous. Sprong lasted however long he lasted. It's not that Heinen's having a poor year or a bust or anything like that, but could you have taken his $2.25 million and Vincent Desharnais' $2 million, got yourself a more capable defenseman, and filled the winger spot with a minimum salary guy, be it an NHL veteran or one of your young players, so that they failed to put that in place. Because this one's not hindsight, everybody. We were sitting there all summer long going, okay, you're trying to build a forest around Hughes, all the redwoods. Who's going to move the puck? Who can skate the puck out of trouble?
Money and
who can make that good first outlet pass, let alone the stretch pass to ignite the rush chance?
I mean, if there's one player I teased in the series versus the Oilers, it was Vincent Desharnais.
No, I know.
They gave him money and term.
Yeah.
He couldn't even play every game for the Oilers.
I was a big Alexander Carrier guy. What did he sign for? $3 million in Nashville before getting traded? Boy, the difference between a guy who can move the puck a little,
Yeah.
Anyways, J-Pat weighed in on the second poll. Massive disappointment, offset regularly by moments of Quinn Hughes' brilliance, which just furthers the disappointment that his performance is happening while the team around him sputters. Mm-hmm. It's a vicious circle. Sorry, Mike, I didn't send you that tweet to post on the show. No, I think Jeff's right as well.
Now, part of me wonders if everybody's hitting on all cylinders, if Quinn Hughes even looks as good, though. I think part of what we're seeing from Quinn Hughes is there is nothing else happening.
Right.
He's going super Hulk here to try and drag this team across the line. He might be a little bit more Barca-lounger Quinn Hughes if everybody else is pulling on the rope as strongly as he is.
No, I think that's he's 9 goals. He's 47 points. He's a 100-point pace. We're just shy of.
I don't know if the points go down because he'd get a lot of accidental points from other people's greatness. But
I wonder if they would. Like, I wonder if he's looking at it now and going, boy, like I have to do the scoring now. I have to do all the scoring now.
I just think
the playmaking.
I just think it would look less apparent than it does. Like now it is, his performances are such an island in this vast sea of mediocrity. Not a sea of Grandland, but it is a sea of mediocrity.
Yeah, well.
That I just don't know if we'd notice it as much if everybody's playing well.
No, I think you're right. We have Eagle Bay. Is that in the super chat?
Not a super chat.
Okay. But he says, incidentally, folks, if you're on YouTube, you can super chat us. We will read your comment, and partial proceeds go into the BC Mental Health Foundation. Rick. He says, Rick might need to go now instead of at the end of the year if this keeps up. God, I did a CTV hit today, and they asked me about Tocchet in season. I just cannot see this management group firing Rick Tocchet. I just, there's no way. Like, I think it would have to get so much worse from here. Now, could I see Rick leaving on his own volition at the end of the year? Yep.
But his comments last night
Can I see the Canucks lowballing on an extension and Tocchet saying, I don't need this shit, I'll go back to TV? Yep. But I this is your coach for this year. Rob Williams had a good tweet on that we'll get to later.
The Tocchet quote? Is that what you're talking
about? No. Which Tocchet quote?
It's my job.
Yeah.
I got to get some guys committed.
Yeah.
It's on me.
Well, again, we've talked about it far and wide. He doesn't sit there and blame players. When shit goes wrong, Rick Tocchet says, put the blame right here. And when things go well, he deflects praise to the players. That's what leaders do.
But I could be wrong here, Matt. I look at that comment, and that, to me, is...
You think he's throwing hands up here? Like
a little bit.
Okay.
It's a little bit out of the handbook of desperation. Not that he's inept. I'm not fully confident in everything he's done here, but I think this is more of he's out of answers right now. And just saying it's my it's my job is just is sort of coach speak rather than what he normally gives us, which is actually a pretty good analysis of what's going on with the team. And when you're throwing that sort of stuff out, I think he's at a loss.
But here's the thing, Blake. How do you go about motivating JT Miller? Like, he was the one guy in the room that you never had to really motivate, right? Like, he was always engaged emotionally. And he's not right now.
Well, let's get into chicken and egg then. Like, JT Miller is getting these low minutes.
Mm-hmm.
A, because he can't play more because he's injured. B, because he's playing so poorly that he's being diminished by Rick Tocchet. Or C, there's such a disconnect between him and coach and him and the rest of the team that's the most that the coach can muster. Like, and it has become a self-perpetuating cycle that the less you play him because of whatever reasons, the poorer he plays, and then you don't want to play him more because he's playing so poorly.
That's very possible. I just...
I
can imagine that's quite jarring to Tocchet and the coaching staff, though. Like, you watch Miller and you just see somebody just doesn't seem like his heart's in it right now.
Well, and it's such the fall from grace. I mean, I keep going back to this October rant that I had because he had a pretty decent first couple of weeks. And I think about all of last season where we praised what the leader that he had become and the leader by example that he had become of, I got this. I'm dragging you. Big goal, tying goals, third period surge. It's on me. Let's go.
Punchy shifts. Yeah. On the forecheck, flying back. No, all those things.
Like, it's not just box score.
No.
That's an easy thing to pick apart.
Well,
we saw it. We saw how he got to that box score. And it is a shadow of that man.
Well,
now.
A couple of things there. Number one, development is not always linear, right? Backward steps are taken.
But again, this isn't a developed guy. This is a 30-year-old player.
No, I know. JT also strikes me. The basketball coach Mike Krzyzewski once said this about his star player Christian Laettner, who was maybe the best college basketball player of all time. He got drafted by a very poor Minnesota Timberwolves team. The head coach was Sidney Lowe. We had him here in Vancouver. And Sidney Lowe, and if you haven't seen the documentary, I Hate Christian Laettner, a very prickly personality, like a guy that his teammates couldn't stand at different times. So some Miller comparables there. And Lowe called Krzyzewski and said, God, Mike, this Laettner guy, I just can't figure him out. And Krzyzewski said, when things are going well and Christian is properly channeled, he can be like a furnace and warm up your whole house. When things are going poorly and Laettner isn't properly channeled, he can burn the house down. And I sort of get that sense with JT Miller, that when things are going well for the Vancouver Canucks and he's got big energy and big personality and he's loud and he's inspiring and he's funny and he's rah-rahing the boys, what we saw last year, I think he is an unbelievable asset to have on your team and in your room.
And you think back to when
things are going poorly, and we saw this earlier in the year, boy, just the drain of having a guy who is relentless on his teammates.
Well, we think back to when this poor relationship with Elias Pettersson apparently started. It was a really bad team. The end of the Travis Green era, if you will. You think about when things reportedly improved. Bruce Boudreau had said that when he joined the team, he had thought that it was behind him, because guess what? Bruce Boudreau joined, and Bruce, there it was. They started to win. So Bruce didn't really see this because there was some rosy good times. It was so much better under Bruce Boudreau that what you're saying holds true.
Vibes were great, right?
Vibes
that's
were great.
What Bruce
House was
brought.
getting warm.
That's Bruce's defining feature, really, as a head coach. He brings the vibes.
Yeah.
He makes going to the rink fun every day. Our friends at Surrey Mitsubishi have a special program exclusively for the Sekeres Price audience. If you've been turned down for financing at other dealerships, Surrey Mitsubishi is going to assign a dedicated representative. It's committed to get you approved through their in-house financing program. Please meet Jessica from Surrey Mitsubishi. She's going to assist getting you approved. Bad credit, negative equity on your current car. Jessica will apply the special program for you and do everything possible to make sure you're approved. Email Jessica at surreymitsubishi.com. Make sure you mention Sekeres Price by name. Some conditions apply. Surrey Mitsubishi, 13820 104th Avenue. In Surrey, of course. Let's get to our top story. Brought to you by Yellow Dog Brewing, Neighborhood Brewing, Foolish Winery. Humiliated in Winnipeg. A 6-1 loss where every single skater was a minus. Head coach Rick Tocchet, quote, everyone on our team had a tough night.
So true.
The Canucks go 1-2-2 on this road trip. They have scored 9 goals in their past 6 games, which includes the one home game prior to this trip. And 4 of those came in the 5-4 OT loss in Montreal to begin this trip. So, doing the quick math there, 5 goals in the other 5 games. And Connor Garland spoke about how unacceptable all this was in the postgame last night. Take a listen.
It was two overtime losses to start, so disappointing there. And then I thought we had 2 good efforts, Carolina, Toronto, and then obviously a bad one to finish. So not good, though. Obviously 1 win out of 5 games, not good enough for us. And you got to start playing better. Just got to respond. I mean, we're all proud in here, proud group, and. I don't think anyone feels good about that performance. So we got to respond. We got LA coming in a couple of days, so we got to be ready for them.
A couple of things there. He liked the effort in Carolina. I almost wonder if he misspoke. I almost wonder if he just so eliminated that from his mind.
No, they liked their defensive efforts so much because the shots on goal from Carolina were so low. They clung to that rather than the fact that they almost had historic shots on goal being low. Yeah. So they skip over that and they look at the other team's shots on goal and think, oh, we played okay.
They just feel they didn't get their bounces
in their 14 shots.
And then response against the Kings. Gang, easier said than done. What does Sleep Doctor teach us, right? That first home game after the long road trip is typically one of the harder ones.
Game 6 of the road trip.
When you've been jumping around time zones.
Well, especially not without a double day off. Like, again, they're
exactly.
Just...
And then secondly, LA's had their number.
Mm-hmm.
It was a 4-2 win in November. We know how that joy-killing LA trap of last year, and they don't play it as much this year. Or
Canucks do. Honestly, for all of the criticisms, guess who's going to dumb the game down and play super simple and lower shots on goal and chances? It's the other team this time.
Thursday could be the dumbest hockey game ever played. The dumbest down hockey game ever played.
Count controlled zone entries.
Right.
Count them tomorrow. You might only need both hands.
This could be Jacques Lemaire versus Jacques Lemaire on Thursday night. His Devils versus his Wild.
Oh, my gosh.
Kings beat him last year. Remember the second half last year we were spending time on who do you want to see in the playoffs? And the case against the LA Kings was, holy shit, they really put it to the Canucks this year. The head-to-head was firmly in LA's favor. Incidentally, I've also decided, because typically I'm a bit of a nostalgist, and so I was big on the Kings going back to their, as you call it, Chevrolet logo for this year. Now that I've seen it on the jersey a bunch of times, no, I'm not feeling it.
Okay.
In fact, I would like to see them go back to Forum blue and gold. With the
otherwise known as purple. Colder weather calls for some darker beer. Try Neighborhood and Yellow Dog's flagship dark beer, if you haven't already. Dark Magic Horchata Milk Stout and Shake-a-Paw Smoked Porter. It is that I had a Guinness the other day. Darker beer, like that's what you want. So try the Neighborhood offerings as soon as you can.
Canucks have not won consecutive games since November 29th and December 1st. They haven't won consecutive games in regulation since November 23rd and 26th. And yet here's the insane part, and getting back to Alvin's comment, I don't like driving to the rink not knowing what I'm going to get. Going back to terrific win against the Leafs, sandwiched between two objectionable losses to Carolina and Winnipeg. They haven't lost consecutive games, Blake, in regulation since November 17th and 19th. So, if that pattern holds, should see a victory or at the very least a point against the LA Kings.
And
right?
this is why this was the argument of the overachieving, underachieving, is they've mitigated damage in a lot of ways with the third column and with bounce backs and the prevention of extended outright losing streaks. We'll see.
Kyle Connor with the natural hat trick. He outscored the Canucks. He needed 13 minutes to outscore the Canucks.
Did not need a towel.
In fact, he needed less than that because the second goal was enough to outscore the Vancouver Canucks all night. I was joking with my buddy at the bar. Well, at least Tocchet's got a bit of a bonus timeout here while they clean up all the hats. 13 minutes in. He doesn't like calling his timeouts, huh? When I know we've talked about this with J-Pat. He likes saving that timeout for last minute strategy. The other thing he doesn't like is the early hook on a goaltender. I was wondering at 3-0. Okay. Because I thought we kicked it around yesterday. There was a case for Demko last night. I'm not sure that Demko would have been the right choice, but it is clear in hindsight that Kevin Lankinen was the wrong choice. And yesterday we talked about it. He looked very much like he's pulling the Alain Vigneault, who gives me the best chance to win, Lankinen. I think what was missed, and we discussed this yesterday too, that was 5 starts out of 6 for Lankinen. He's played in 7 of 8 because of the injury to Demko coming out of that Seattle game. Earlier in the season, Tocchet said, I got to be careful. I can't overplay him. That's when his level slips. We had seen that on a couple of occasions.
Let me ask you this. Has somebody told Rick Tocchet, or is Rick Tocchet just too scared to insert a cold Thatcher Demko?
And that could be very, very fair.
Based on injury.
Demko might have told him, look, I have an extensive pregame preparation for this popliteus injury. Please, coach, only under the worst, necessary injury, got to go in circumstances should I be used in relief. And if that is the case, then fair enough. But it's not the first. Blakey left Lankinen in for all 7 goals against Edmonton earlier in the season. That's really the only other game that you can look at from Lankinen and say, boy, things got ugly. He gave up 7 that night, November 9th, against Edmonton. But he allows 5 on 21 shots last night. And it's either 3 or 4 goals you want back there.
Yep.
You misplay the puck on the first. The big rebound on the second. That one is the gray zone for me. It's a big rebound, but also you've got some skaters who aren't helping you out. The Pionk goal from distance, just can't. That's a Artie Shilov's goal. And then the Niederreiter goal, Forbort needs to do a better job of tying up Niederreiter. I realize Niederreiter is a big, strapping guy, but Forbort is too. He's got to do a better job tying him up, and yet it's a second chip that Nino gets with a whole lot of cage showing.
He seemed to lose his post again, though. He seemed to lose his net a little bit, all night. It was very odd. And then, but I also think, Matt, there was a few other point-blank opportunities where Lankinen made fabulous saves. That could have been 9-0.
No, easily. There were a couple.
Yeah.
In the first period. It could have been 5-0 easily in the first period. He's been an exceptional story and a big reason why the Vancouver Canucks are as competitive as they are. So don't anybody get too bothered about the criticism of Lankinen here today. We understand the totality. The good has far outweighed the bad.
Well,
but you got to call a spade, and last night was not Kevin Lankinen's night. And the question is, was this predictable? Well, did Terranius see this coming? Is Ian Clark there at all providing guidance? Should Rick have known better?
We have wondered aloud, where would the Canucks be without Kevin Lankinen this season? Mm-hmm. You saw it. Mm-hmm. That is, when you put replacement level goaltending in, that's what happens.
Yeah. Miller gets demoted from the first power play unit for Lekkermack. He draws a penalty. He doesn't go out on the power play. He plays 14:37 all told and just 11 minutes at even strength. Only Höglander plays less. And of course, we had Cam Robinson on the show yesterday saying that his sources are telling him through NHL group player chats that Quinn might be fed up with JT as well. And then there's Pettersson. Another quiet night for Elias Pettersson. Tries to go Superman, jump up, catch that puck on the breakout on, was that the first goal or I think it was the second. It's one shot. It's one block shot. It's one hit. It's one takeaway.
And that's just it. And it wasn't that long ago, a week and a half ago, JT Miller had a 2 or 3 point night. Every once in a while, can these guys do something? Yeah. But they are paid to be there every single night. It's not even close.
How about a night where we convene here and go, Miller and Pettersson were excellent last night. Your top 2 centers won you that game. Mm-hmm. Your top 2 centers made everybody around them better. Boy, was that power play dangerous. Did you see them work the puck around and get those good looks? Have we had one night like that this year? Have we had one?
No,
even
not
going
really.
back in October.
It seems like it's been one or the other at best.
At best.
Yeah.
At best.
And then the most awkward moment of the night, man. Nils Höglander scores one of the better Canuck goals of the season.
Holy fuck. Put it in the loop.
Like, what the hell?
He's got that in him.
Not just a shot. It'd be one thing if it was just a shot. His effort to get that puck and stick check, throw the stick away, and it was tremendous.
He breaks a 34-game drought. 34 games. You
could
can score a goal like that? How do you ever go 34 games without?
And I'm not sure that when he dreamt every night over the past, how many nights is 34 games? That's probably 80 nights, 85 nights of sleep. Every night that he went to bed wondering, what's it going to look like? He probably envisioned himself celebrating that goal. Couldn't do that last night. He scores that goal, wipes his brow, and skates to the bench knowing that meant absolutely nothing to anybody but me.
Blake, Guy Lafleur and Mike Bossy were up in heaven looking down going, that's a great fucking goal.
Well, and the latest evidence of what we've talked about, if they loosen the reins on this team a little bit, allow them to shoot. Again, another guy with a good shot. We just saw it.
Unassisted snipe off the right wing, J-Pat. 2 of Höglander's 3 goals this season have been flat-out snipes. But just back on Miller Pettersson for a moment, because I wanted to get to this tweet. I thought it was a good one in my mentions, at YVR_investor. The internal dynamics will determine whether they are a playoff team. Is that getting more and more pronounced for everyone? That it's not talent. We know they have talent. It's no longer injuries, right? Only Dakota Joshua is out. Could you argue style of play and deficiency of the puck transporting defenseman? Yep. That's fair. But is internal dynamics even more important?
Well, I think there's 3 legitimate theories here. That is like, what's the biggest drag on the Canucks as we speak right now? Because injuries in the most customary sense, as you said, is over. But I think you could argue if JT Miller is seriously hurt, not injured, but seriously hurt, and there's been speculation about neck and shoulder issues here.
And with Elias as well.
And how 100% is Philip Hronek? Probably not very. Quinn Hughes had to sit out time. So if they're not injured but they're hurt, is that the biggest drag? Is it the dynamics becoming a drag, or is it coaching tactics?
I think if you're an ostrich Canucks fan, in terms of bury the head, hear no evil, see no evil on the 2 of them not getting along and that affecting team chemistry, I think the explanation you're looking for is that JT has been battling something in his shoulder, neck, back all season long, that Elias's knee has not been right. There might be more with Elias as well. And that this is just a star-crossed bad luck season where your 2 best forwards had to play most of, if not the entirety of the year, through ailment that hampered their performance and didn't allow them to get back to the playoffs or fell short of whatever goal.
And obviously, we've already touched on roster construction. There's numerous reasons why the Canucks are where they are below the playoff.
It's always many reasons.
It's always many reasons. But what's the biggest drag? Because we saw this team race out to what's the high water mark? 7 games above 500. They're at 5 now. 7 games above 500, I think, is a high. But they got there early in the season. Like, they're good enough. You could argue they're certainly not cup contenders, but this roster, as you lay it out on paper, while filled with flaws, is good enough to be a playoff team.
Well, as Rob Williams tweeted last night, the amount of people in my replies talking about coaching, I don't think that's it. Okay. He doesn't think that's it. Let's say you think it is it, or partially one of the reasons. Miller and Pettersson, for whatever reason, both having off seasons. Lankinen been good, but not Vezina level great like Demko last year. Defense is a massive downgrade from last year. So, yeah, there's many different potions, many different cocktails that you can shake up and say, here's why the Canucks are where they are. Let us move on to the hot stove here, because an interesting TSN Insider segment last night with Chris Johnston, who reports the sense around the league is JT Miller is the one more likely to be traded. That Miller would be willing to waive his no-move clause for the right situation. Based on that and other reports that are out there, I think the Vancouver Canucks management group is slowly realizing that it's got to be Miller. And I think that our old friend, former Canucks president GM Mike Gillis, made a really, really good point last week when he dropped in on the program. And I want to thank Leonard, who got in my DMs last night and pointed it out to me. Gillis talked about how they had to make room for the Sedins as leaders, that they didn't just assume there was leadership in their dressing room, but actively worked to create leadership. And as you may remember, the Canucks made the playoffs with Alain Vigneault winning the Jack Adams and Roberto Luongo with a virtuoso season in 06 and 07. They came back that next year. And kind of like this year, you started to have things go wrong. Marcus Naslund was a diminished player. Brendan Morrison was a diminished player. His Ironman streak came to an end that year. Trevor Linden was a healthy scratch as much as he was in the lineup as the season went along. Even Roberto had to leave at midseason. Remember, Gina had a complicated pregnancy. Roberto had to miss a handful of games and was clearly a little bit more distracted. And they missed the playoffs that year. And Gillis comes in, and Naslund, Linden, Morrison all went out the door. Now, the initial captaincy went to Roberto, but a year later it was on Hronek.
They brought in other veteran players, too, that year. They did. Dimitra Sundin, of course. Right. Willie Mitchell. They had some guys with chops that were training wheels, if you will, for lack of a better term.
Mitchell was already here.
Right. Yeah. Already here, but he was there.
He was there, yeah. And
to be amongst the leadership group.
Yeah, and I'm at the point now where I think you have to do the same for Quinn Hughes. I think when you have as dominant a personality as JT in that room, I think if it's truly going to be Quinn's team, if he is truly going to be the unquestioned leader with all the power, all the capacity to affect that room in the ways he sees fit, then I think they have to move JT out. Even if there's short-term pain, Blake. Even if it means not making an ideal trade for JT, because let's face it, with the no-move clause, that's probably too big an ask. But if you take him out of the equation and the room truly becomes Quinn's and Elias Pettersson feels comfortable, then I think you have achieved something on team dynamic that may outweigh whatever you may have lost in terms of personnel and talent.
Here's the question. Do you come close to getting, I have no doubt about the reporting that in their mind's eye, they would much rather trade JT Miller. But I think the interest is also correspondingly much lower.
I agree.
On JT
That's
Miller.
Why I say I think he may have to bite the bullet here and make a trade that you otherwise would not have made.
I think the Canucks feel like JT Miller is a... I think people
especially if you're making it in season here, because I think the other calculation that they have to come to a conclusion on is, do we have to make this now for the benefit of this season and this group of players and coaches, and not to mention our fans? Do we have to give this group the best shot to be all it can be this year, even if it's a long shot that we're going to win the Stanley Cup? But do we have to address this immediately to move forward so that at least we got a fighting chance this season?
Let me ask you this too. How dangerous / beneficial could the Four Nations face-off be for the JT Miller file? Because if he is completely absent in that tournament, oh boy.
Not to mention if
But if he's great,
Not to
great.
mention if there's discord in the USA room, and that has been a thing in the past with USA hockey.
Well, there's a lot of tall poppies. There's a lot of characters in the American group.
But the flip side is JT, if JT plays great in that tournament,
Completely.
are there
Do they
other
salvage the
suitors?
trade? Yes.
Does he make some friends with guys on teams that he otherwise wouldn't have accepted a trade to, but now thinks, oh man, I can work with this guy. He's a collaborator. And then there's Elias as well. If Elias looks great beside his fellow Swedes, what does that say about his performances with the Canucks? Rangers, and then the two quote-unquote home markets for JT, the Blue Jackets and the Penguins. I do wonder whether he'd say yes to all three of those.
The Jackets seems very interesting to me because with the, not leadership void, they've got leaders on that team, but they don't have a star player on the forward set.
No.
They've got a former star in Sean Monahan who's having a wonderful season. They've got a budding star in Kirill Marchenko.
And
the really young guys. Yes, the really young guys.
Yeah.
But they're not stars.
No.
JT Miller would come in and be sort of the resume alpha in that group. Mm-hmm. Now, Monahan's a different personality too. He's sedate as well.
Well, the captain is Boone Jenner.
Yeah, the captain's Boone Jenner.
And he's been a long and of course you have Werenski, who's a big voice, having an incredible season.
But if you're John Davidson, why do you pull this off?
It's not Davidson. It's Don Waddell.
Don Waddell, pardon me. If you're Don Waddell, why do you pull it off? Your centers would be JT Miller, Sean Monahan, and Boone Jenner.
Mm-hmm. Well, and Fantilli, and so they got Sillinger there as well. I wonder if Sillinger is the piece.
Yeah,
you're not getting Fantilli in a JT Miller trade of that. I think so, and you need a center back. I wonder, but now Sillinger's having a good year too.
Not as good as Johnson. Johnson's having a great year.
Kent's having that great year.
Yeah,
okay.
It's almost a point per game.
Has Kent played any?
I don't know the answer to that. Okay. I don't know the answer to that.
But yeah, is there a deal to be made there? And then Elliot Friedman yesterday saying he got the impression that there's people who now think because the Miller Pettersson thing has gotten into the open, they've had to deal with it, and that they think it's been constructive, that it's a good thing that it happened. And frankly, if that's the case, by design, right? As we said at the time, Alvin and Tocchet and Hughes are not shrinking away from this situation anymore. Why is that? Because it's their last resort. They tried to manage this situation in a lot of different ways, and yet still it was combustible, and yet still both of them refused to acknowledge it. And so guess what? We're going to acknowledge it for you. You're big boys. You've made your beds. Now it's time to lie in it. You should know better. Get together and find a truce.
And I think some fans are sick of hearing about this story. No doubt about it. But as long as those two players continue to be the biggest disappointments on this team, and the team continues to lose, something has to give there. Like, the fate of the Canucks this season, it rests at the feet of those two players. We've seen it. The goaltending has been good enough. Quinn Hughes has been all world.
Yeah. Well, the fate of the Canucks for years beyond this one.
Maybe beyond this one as well. Mm-hmm. But if you're wondering why these two names suck up a lot of the oxygen in the room right now, is because they are everything to this team.
But also because it's an exceptional situation. News isn't planes landing safely.
No.
News is when planes crash. Mm-hmm. This is a crash before our eyes. Lastly here, Delta's Tristan Jarry on waivers. Oof.
Soap opera there,
this
too.
This is feel terrible for the young guy.
He's played the bulk of the Penguins games this year. He has been their starter. But they
only
said no more.
6 of 22 times has he gotten through the first 6 shots of a hockey game without allowing a goal. Extraordinary. 3 more years at 5.3 on the Tristan Jarry salary, which the Pens are going to likely have they'll bury $1 million of it in the minors if he clears waivers, and I think he will clear waivers because I'm not sure anybody wants to take on the contract. If he was in the final year of his deal, maybe somebody take a shot there, but that's an awful lot
term
of
is too
term
much.
and money to.
If it's an expiring deal, I think he gets snapped up
yeah.
immediately. I think somebody who's not sure about their goaltender snaps him up immediately. But 3 years,
And LeBrun reporting Calgary not interested in moving Rasmus Andersson. Who said he hates the Canucks?
he hates it.
last
Yeah,
night.
hates the Oilers. Hates
They're
the
hoping
Canucks.
to extend him. I think we can put this one to bed for this season. Calgary is competitive enough. As we said at the start of the season, you may remember, this season started with so many Canucks fans going, Rasmus Andersson. He who was taken with a pick that the Vancouver Canucks sent to Calgary in the Sven Berchi deal all those years ago. Boy, he'd be perfect. Right shot guy, big, physical, scores, moves the puck, on a great contract. My kingdom for Rasmus Andersson. And we said, if Conroy pulls that deal off, he's basically telling the Calgary Flames fans, we'll see you at the new building in a couple of years.
Yeah.
Well, they're competitive this year. He's their best player. I would be at this. And, of course, if Conroy does want to enter more of a rebuild, he can move Anderson in the summer.
He's also a
and
heartbeat.
get a boat.
He's a heartbeat player.
He
He's got
sure
that,
is.
He's got that swagger.
He
He's
sure
got that
is.
panache, and the fans love him.
Right.
He's not going anywhere.
I think it's time to scratch him off the wish list, everybody.
Super chat from Spatzilly. Had to delay my work meeting to super chat. Love you guys. Thanks for being yourselves.
very,
Flattery
very
will
kind.
get you everywhere. Certainly super chats
Very,
will
very
as well.
kind.
So thank you.
Greta, well, hopefully we'll see him at Greta.
Come
A
on
week
in.
from tomorrow, January 23rd. We got a watch party going down, Canucks Army watch party going down. We'll be there in attendance, supporting, chatting with everybody. Watch Vancouver take on Edmonton, big rivalry. We got exciting giveaways, hockey tickets, signed memorabilia, jerseys to be won, doors at 5, puck drop 6. In support of One Broken Bike, our charitable partner. We'll raise some money there as well. VIP 4-person reservation. Entry into the event, a Greta burger, a beverage, plus a game card for the awesome arcade. Don't miss out. Get your tickets, nationgear.ca. That's Thursday, January 23rd at Greta, 50 West Cordova. Let the games begin. Big show today, beefy. Laurence Gilman joins us. Some insight on what we were talking about in terms of making room for leaders and what he sees here with Miller and Pettersson from afar. Discussion on whether they're a playoff team. Frank Corrado joins. He did the game last night for the regional Winnipeg broadcast on TSN. Boy, did he have a thing or two to say about the Canucks' performance. And then Stephen Brunt, author, journalist, television presenter. If you don't know, Steve's doing a series called Up Close, part of the Nation Network here. We had him on a few weeks ago in advance of his first show. Well, the second episode is dropped. It's with Edge, the Canadian wrestler, now living in North Carolina. It was a good chat. So big show coming up. Time now for our Bet365 Bets of the Day. This segment brought to you by Bet365, proud sponsor, Sekeres Price. We love having them aboard. I did not love my pick of under last night. Kyle Connor almost single.
You had the right theory. It was such a...
Couldn't get a save. So,
Yeah.
No, game was over, 5.5 goals, so I lost. Did you win yours?
I did not. 2 assists for Quinn Hughes certainly did not happen. Unassisted Hoglander goal.
Yeah, exactly. 1 point. They got 1 point all last night. Everybody was a minus. Okay, well, I'll point forward to the weekend's NFL playoff slate.
Mm-hmm.
It's no secret to anyone who's listened to this show. I have been very bullish on the LA Rams right from the jump. Even when they weren't going well in October, September, whenever that was, I kept the faith in Sean McVay's team. Fantastic victory against the Minnesota Vikings. I'm a little worried about the short week here because they've had going to travel to Philly but I'm getting 6 points against an Eagles team that certainly didn't look all that great offensively against Green Bay. In fact, if they don't get a turnover on the opening kickoff, I'm not sure they score a whole lot. They are not getting open down the field, and I am not the biggest believer in Jalen Hurts as a passer to begin with. I am a huge believer in Sean McVay and his coaching staff and being able to to have the schematic edge. So give me the Rams +6, and frankly, a small side wager here on the money line at +225.
I'm going to be very unexciting looking ahead to the Ravens and the Bills. One thing I've noticed about Josh Allen's Bills these days is that they're not as high-flying an offense as we would think that they are on a game-in, game-out basis.
They have moments, but no.
Yeah. Like with that arm, you want to bet on the arm and think, oh, there's going to be a lot of points on the board.
A lot of it is like Josh Allen running now. It's almost like a bit of a college offense. The quarterback run game is big for Buffalo. Of course, it's big for Baltimore too.
It's the second biggest over-under of the weekend.
Mm-hmm.
And with those two teams, I think they comfortably get to the under 51.5. So I'm going the under.
Open an account with Bet365 today. Bet on a huge range of markets, so whatever the moment, it's never ordinary on Bet365. Use code NATION when opening that account. Laurence Gilman coming up next.
I'll be honest, I don't get to many games anymore, whether it be at the arena or the stadium. Ticket availability cost, it's a bit of an issue these days. So I prefer to go where there's atmosphere and I know I can get in. Greta Bar YVR. Soak up all the atmosphere with your fellow fans and enjoy a great night with a great street food menu. I prefer the poutine. Weekly drink specials as well at Greta Bar YVR at 50 West Cordova. And we'll be having our viewing parties there all season long as well. Your pregame, your postgame, it's at Greta Bar YVR, 50 West Cordova. Let the games begin.
So Garrison Price from the historic Wall Center. We welcome back to the program. First time here in 2025, the former assistant general manager of the Vancouver Canucks, NHL executive in Toronto, Winnipeg, and Phoenix. Happy New Year, Laurence Gilman. How you doing?
I'm well, guys. Happy New Year to you, too. All the best in 2025.
And belated happy birthday as well, sir.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. It was a milestone birthday for me. But, the beat goes on.
Yeah.
That's right. Time keeps ticking.
So
I saw that you had Mr. Warmth on in a cameo appearance last week.
He was
either,
very
warm and fuzzy.
It was either him or the host of Sprockets, one of the two.
No kidding.
No, very nice visit from him, yes.
Yeah, and he was on exceptional behavior, and then as he was walking out, he said, you guys need to start asking Gilman tougher questions on Wednesday.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah, I saw that. He tells me he doesn't watch these the drops on
right.
this, but obviously that's not the case.
Yeah, it's pretty clear. He knew.
Yeah.
He made an interesting point, though, that I'd love you to pick up on. But when we were asking him about this Miller Pettersson business, he said, we had to make room for the Sedins as leaders. We had to develop leaders. We didn't just assume we had leadership in the room. Maybe you can expand on that a little bit, and then we'll talk about this current Vancouver Canucks room.
Well, unlike his claim that he doesn't watch when I'm on, I did watch. So
there you go.
And as much as I love Mike, there may have been a little bit of a revisionist history there, but I will say that when this deal was going down, meaning when Mike was going to be, when it appeared Mike was going to be getting the job, and I was sitting in Phoenix, and I took a look at the Canucks, roster, and I looked at Hockey DB, and I sort of started to familiarize myself with the team. And I took note that, the two leading scorers in the 07-08 season were Hronek and Daniel Sedin. And when Mike actually called me to offer me the job to come to the Canucks, I was in Las Vegas in a hotel room. And the first question I asked him, I said, I have one question to ask you. What are you doing? What is your intent with respect to Marcus Naslund, who's going to be an unrestricted free agent? And the reason I asked that question was because I had already worked for one former agent that had become general manager, and I had witnessed a propensity to go back to the well with clients that he had before, which I understood because of the familiarity and the relationships and the confidence and all of that. But I wanted to know where Mike stood with respect to this former client who was the captain of the team. And Mike's response to me was, I don't believe there's a place for Marcus on the team going forward. And when he said that to me, I said immediately, I'm in. because I knew if he could make a decision like that, adverse to a client who had generated hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars to him in the form of fees, that he was going to be able to make tough decisions.
Right.
And as we looked at the roster, you had some other significant veteran players who were on expiring contracts, and I think Trevor Linden knew very well that Mike Gillis had no interest in bringing him back, and I believe Trevor was at the end of the line anyway. And we also made the decision that we weren't going to be bringing Brendan Morrison back. And he's right in the fact that those three players, that moved, created a path for not just Hronek and Daniel Sedin, but several other players to assume greater leadership roles in the team. And if you recall, Hronek wasn't the first captain that we appointed.
Correct.
It was the ill-fated decision to make Roberto Luongo the nominal captain, which obviously failed miserably. No fault of Roberto's, but because the position of goaltender was, incongruous to being the captain of the team. And I still actually like that Mike made that call, or we made that call as a group, because it was thinking outside of the box and thinking differently. But Mike is right in the fact that, but turning over the roster and moving out those players did provide room for not just Hronek and Daniel Sedin to grow, but players like Kevin Bieksa and Ryan Kessler and, eventually Alex Burrows and others. So it is true that moving out the roster gives other players an opportunity to ascend to leadership roles. And
tilling the soil for growth.
Yeah,
right?
well, but before we bring it home here to modern day Vancouver Canucks, just a follow up. I think that's the harshest I've ever heard you characterize the Roberto as captain thing. Failed miserably, in the position incongruous to leadership. Can you be more specific? Like, I know the league didn't love it, but what else transpired there that leads you to such a harsh?
Well, I just think
characterization.
I think it's a very difficult position to put a goaltender in, whereby the first person invariably at the end of the game, media goes into the dressing room, and the first person they tend to go to is the captain. And after a loss, you're putting the goaltender in a pretty difficult spot with respect to his place amongst his teammates when he says something to the effect of, "We didn't deserve to win tonight," or "We got outplayed." If I'm another player sitting in the room, that's a tough thing to hear from the goaltender. It's essentially more or less like finger pointing. When a positional player stands up and says, we weren't very good and we got beat to pucks in the corners and our opponent outplayed us, that rings a lot differently to the other players in the dressing room. That's the main reason why I felt it was, as I said, in Congress. I also think it put extra pressure on a player you want to put less pressure on rather than
right. Yeah.
So
positional players never comment on the goaltending, right? I mean, it's true. Like it doesn't go both ways.
Well, unless it's exceptional, right?
Right.
Take last night for example.
Yeah.
As good as Kevin Lankinen has been through the first half of the season, he wasn't good last night.
No.
And particularly on those first two goals, obviously terrible judgment on the misplay behind the net, and which led to Kyle Connor's first goal, and then an absolutely big, fat, juicy rebound on the second goal, which Kyle Connor easily converted. And then it's hard to fault him on the third goal. Tyler Myers was caught way out of position. You're sending in a guy who's already got 2 goals and is one of the best pure goal scorers in the league, 1-on-1. But that game was over after that. You can say that the goal scored by Pionk at the beginning of the second was the nail in the coffin, but for my money, that game was over pretty quickly. But in any event, no one stood up and said, Kevin Lankinen had saved their bacon on multiple occasions, including on Saturday night when, they got outplayed by the Leafs, but yet won 3-0. So no one's going to stand up and say our goalie, is the reason we lost. And again, as I said, it's tough for the goalie to stand up and say, we lost because the other guys around me weren't good enough.
Okay, let's bring it home here. Can this room and this team truly be Quinn Hughes' team if you have such a loud dressing room presence in JT Miller? I don't have to make room for Quinn Hughes as you guys did for the Sedins and others?
First of all, I don't know what's happening in their room. I'm not there. I'm a part of the team. In theory, I'll give you the answer that no, I don't believe you have to move a big personality. There's lots of times where you have a captain who, Joe Sakic wasn't, a bold, boisterous figure. He was a captain who led by example. And, you had, big personalities like Patrick Waugh on that team, to name just one player. So I don't think that it's an impetus to having a captain that provides true leadership or having, unity in a room. And I mean, this topic has been, as far as I'm concerned, and I'm not there, but it's been debated ad nauseum. Families squabble, friends fight, life goes on. There needs to be a level of maturity in that room, and people need to do their jobs and get forward. And no, I do not believe that they need to move someone out. Like, by my measure, I think Quinn Hughes is doing a pretty darn good job of leading that team at this point in time. He's by far been their best player, with Kevin Lankinen being number 2, in my opinion, at the midway point. But, I don't see Quinn Hughes' job as captain being compromised at all by, the white noise that's surrounding the team.
Okay, what about performance, though? Let's pretend the soap opera wasn't even a news story. The bottom has dropped out of the performance of both of these players. You can make the extrapolation that it's because of the drama, but again, let's pretend we don't even know about that. Would you be tempted to make a move here, or would you have faith that one of these two guys this season, because you don't want to throw away this season. This season is still an available playoff season where you never know what can happen. Would you be tempted to look at the market for both of these guys?
Well, I assume when you say both of these guys, you mean
Miller and Pettersson.
Ben Miller and Pettersson. Yeah, I mean, as I've stated with you in the past, like I'm not about getting rid of problems. I would be still trying to solve the problem, whatever problems, whatever they may be. You have two exceptional hockey players, and I thought, I watched the game on Saturday night, and I thought Elias Pettersson played a great game.
He's very good at it, yeah.
A great two-way game, and I have seen, flashes like in the second shift of the game last night. He stripped the puck from one of the Jets defensemen at the on the end boards behind the goal, like at will, which is probably the peak of the performance for the Canucks last night. The numbers aren't there, but from what I have seen, Elias Pettersson has played, a little better of late. And you got to look at, last night's game in particular. They're at the end of a tough road trip where they're playing really good teams. Montreal's been as hot as anybody. You're playing Washington, Carolina, Toronto. It's an 11-day trip, and then you suddenly have to go into the cold, harsh, frozen tundra of Winnipeg to play, arguably the best team in the league that hasn't, left its home since the beginning of the new year and has played 6 straight, and they're rolling. So, with all due respect, I don't know that the sky is necessarily falling on the entire team. I think they were a tired hockey club last night, and you had tired players, and I think you had mentally tired players. Like when JT Miller threw that pizza pie from the corner to the center of the blue line in his first shift, I thought that this is going to be a tough night for all these guys, and in fact, it was. And I didn't necessarily equate that with the, saga and drama of what is going on in the dressing room of the Vancouver Canucks.
Do you think they're a playoff team, Laurence? Do you think they're better in Calgary and St. Louis?
I did at the start of the season. I have maintained, they had injury issues, clearly. And obviously you go 20 games without having your second best defenseman. That's a crippling, factor. He came back. Philip Hronek came back last night. I do believe, I believe they have the goaltending that's good enough. I believe they're good enough up front. I just don't believe their defense is on par. And in my mind, I mean, that's priority number one. If it's a competitive division, right? Like the teams you talk about, St. Louis, Calgary, whoever else, it's tough. And you're not going to get there getting a point in an overtime game. I mean, you need to be winning games, and they've had some adversity. Obviously, they've had adversity in their room. They've had adversity in the form of injuries to significant players. Pettersson's out, Hronek's out for a long time, Demko's out. I mean, that's a tough, thing to overcome. All teams have to deal with it, yes, but let's see. I mean, at this stage, you have to sort of handicap it at 50-50 for them. I do think if they get their act together, they can be a playoff team. I think they should be a playoff team, but I'm not taking anything away from St. Louis or Calgary to name two teams. I mean, they're seemingly well coached at this point in time. They're playing well, and things are going in their favor.
We probably asked you this, but we're probably a month after we've last asked you this, and that matters here because you're a little bit further along, and yet 39 games still remain here. Where do you subscribe on the? I don't know if it's the get in and you never know what can happen, or hey, we've underachieved, so if we get into the playoffs, we can make some noise. Like, when you look at this team and you're a manager, do you say it's still a chance to win the Stanley Cup here, or do you say this is not the year? I'm not investing any further into this roster for a team that I really don't believe has the chance to win the Stanley Cup?
Well, I wouldn't be making that decision today, Blake, for sure. Okay. You've got whatever it is, 6 weeks remaining between now and the trade deadline. If I were managing the team, I would continue my evaluation of the team. Obviously, general managers speak to each other every single day, or at least they should. And I would be, talking to other teams, seeing what they're doing, looking for a fit. Obviously, Jim Rutherford is an extremely experienced hockey executive. Patrick Alvin has proven his competence. I'm certain they have a plan with respect to how they would like to improve the hockey club. Obviously, they would like to make the playoffs if they can, and they'll have to wait and see how things get closer to the trade deadline. And it's also not inconceivable that someone could offer them a deal they can't refuse. At which point, I mean, I wouldn't not make it if you think it's going to improve your team today as well as down the road. So I'm not prepared to say that this is not the year. At this point in time, perhaps in the moment, have you ever had that battle though of logic, reason, and math on the one side? Like, that's where we are right now, that of course this team can turn it around. Of course there's runway left. Versus your gut, where it's possible, that even these players have had it in their past to perform at the level that's required. But have you ever had that battle where your gut is just like, just don't like the feel here? Well, in the year that Mike got fired and John Tortorella came in and got fired, I mean, that was that type of year. I mean, we peaked in December of that year, and then from that point on, it was downhill. And as I recall, I had that feeling in my gut from essentially January, the middle of January, where we are today, forward, that this isn't going to work out well for anybody here, and the team is going to likely not make the playoffs for the first time. And that wasn't something that really anybody wanted to admit, quite honestly, at that time. But yes, Blake, I did. That was one season in my career where I did have that sinking gut feeling this time that this isn't the year we're going to make the playoffs.
I'll tell you who that worked out for was that Hockey Night in Canada intermission. That was probably the best programming Hockey Night in Canada has had at the intermission ever. That Calgary game.
You're talking when John wanted the face-to-face?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you think you're just doing a boring player interview with Scott Oak and a little panel discussion, and the next thing you know, you've got...
That was the peak.
You have Jerry Springer show breaking out.
The peak of Trevor Martin's career, our producer, who was down there in the hall with the microphone to hand to the radio in a walk-off interview. He's like, guys, there is something going on down here.
Not sure we're getting our interview. Yeah. Burroughs just took off.
The funny thing about that was that we were sitting in the GM's booth, and I was sitting watching the TV and watched it unfold, and Mike and I were laughing. Like, oh my God, look what he's doing now. And like I just said to Mike, like, we're going to New York. Like, start making reservations, Mike. Like,
yeah, exactly. Tell the wives and kids, Daddy's got a business trip.
Yeah, you know what? Listen, I actually didn't mind, to be honest with you. Like, I like John, and I liked his fiery nature, and he stood up for his team. He was hard on the players, but he stood up for them at all times. And he was, that whole game was a debacle from, obviously, the opening faceoff. And I didn't have a problem that he lost his marbles.
Well, it's funny you say that because, he had such the scary, intimidating reputation. I can remember Dave Tomlinson taking a seat in the final row of the stands to be as far away from him as possible in that first morning skate. But we never had he did a show with us. However, he was contracted to do. I don't remember how many hits with us, but we never had a problem with him.
No.
John's a fine gentleman. He sees the world in black and white, and that's the way it is. And I don't think I've encountered too many people who want to win or hate losing more than John Tortorella, and that's not a bad thing in this industry.
Yep, and he did a hell of a job with Philadelphia last year.
And to his credit too, he made a couple of years after and said,
right.
I wasn't myself in Vancouver.
Yeah,
so
and then he got better from that experience.
I think he was burnt out.
For sure.
That's what he said. Yeah,
probably would have been better served to take the year off. But when someone's offering you that kind of glue over that term, how do you say no?
Yeah,
right.
Awesome stuff, Laurence. Thank you for this, and we will catch up next week, my friend.
Okay, guys. Thank you.
If you are struggling with things like managing stress, anxiety, relationships, or divorce, reach out to the counselors at Advanced Counseling. Book your free initial consultation today at advancedcounseling.ca.
Secure some price from the Historic Wall Center, joined now by author, longtime sports columnist, our friend Mr. Stephen Brunt from his home in Hamilton. How are you?
Hey, boys. How are you? Happy New Year. I know it's too late
Happy
to
New
say
Year.
it, but I'm saying it anyway.
When we had you on the first time, Brunt, you told us about your new series, Up Close, and how you would have an eclectic mix of guests. We started with global sports executive Keith Pelly, jet set from London to Toronto. And now we've gone down to the sticks of North Carolina for wrestler Adam Copeland, a.k.a. The Edge. Boy, Brunt, you've got range here. Bud.
Yeah, see, eclectic. See, what did I tell you? It's going to be kind of all over the place in a good way, and who knows what's coming next.
So why Edge? Why Adam Copeland? What fascinated you there?
Super interesting guy. Like I have a fascination with wrestling. Like I'm not as hardcore as Jeff Merrick or somebody like that, who is kind of crazy hardcore. And used to do a radio wrestling show. The first time I ever met him was doing a wrestling show on the Fan in Toronto. But since I was a kid, it's been in the culture and around me, and I've watched it. I've seen it live. I've interviewed the odd wrestler, and and Copeland is number one, he's got a great his backstory is tremendous. It's kind of a fairy tale story, but also a super smart dude. And he's been in that business for a long time. He's kind of at the very tail end of his career now, I think, but although with those guys you never know. And we're at a stage, there was a time, many years ago now, when what they used to call kayfabe in wrestling, right, where you had to pretend it was real, right? And so you couldn't pull back the curtain. The character was you, and but now there's a whole kind of culture built around talking about the art of it and how you do it and how it works and the machineries of the business and all that stuff. So talking to a guy like him about those things, especially, I found completely fascinating. Like he's a very compelling person.
It's a strange transition that you just talked about, from where it was verboten to believe that it was scripted, to now, these guys come and go, they drop in from their Hollywood lifestyle, and it's like, is John Cena here, or is he John Cena the wrestler here? Like it's very unclear. And as a guy that kind of left wrestling behind years ago, I do find it fascinating how they treat it as a business, but it's not even acting. Like how do they describe the business that they're in right now, vis-a-vis sports versus acting, or a combo platter?
Well, they are athletes, right? So that's never been, there's no argument. These guys they're all tremendous athletes, and that was always the kind of the counter. I say during those years when somebody would say it's fake, they would wrap a headlock around on somebody, or Jerry Lawler with Andy Kaufman, almost breaking his neck. Like, they are athletes, but athletes who are playing out this kind of pantomime performance that, which is like theater, like it really is. And I think, the thing talking to him that, I liked the best, I think, was, him talking about that power, about, and he's a big music guy too. So we talked a lot about music and about, kind of, bands and playing arenas or playing football stadiums, and what it must feel like to walk out on that stage and have the whole place you just have it in the palm of your hand. But it's the same with these guys, right? When you walk out and, you feel that, like, the crowd, everybody in the crowd loves you, or everybody in the crowd hates you, if you're a heel, drawing heat like that. And the ability to kind of, draw emotion, out of a group with your performance, which is, that's acting, right? Or, a lot of other things. It's an art form. So, and super aware of that. Like these, he knows how it works. And he's played a lot of different kind of variations on the same character over the years, but, he knows how to push that button with a crowd, in a huge venue, and have them, jump to their feet in, in joy or anger.
Because it's live, I said music, a blend of sports and acting. Maybe it's more sports and music, isn't it? Because of the live, that instant feedback that a musician gets when they walk out. It's a little bit more like that, perhaps.
Well, it is, and scripted, yes, like everybody, there's an outcome. But there's a huge element of improvisation here, right? Like the guys, when you're working on the mic, it's not like they have cue cards in front of you, and the wrestlers have to work together to do that performance. Like there's a collaborative thing. So, again, even if that collaboration means, jumping off a top rope on somebody or a cage or smashing through a table or any number of other things, that's, all of that's communicated, among the guys in the ring. So, which is kind of like being in a band, I think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Well, and speaking of kayfabe, and does anyone remember John Stossel of ABC's 2020?
Yes.
With David Schultz, Dr. D at MSG, and he asked him about it being fake, and he got the open hand slap to the face that knocked him down, and he sued the WWF.
Yes, indeed.
And David Schultz. That was almost 40 years ago. Now, here's what I'll say, Steve, about wrestling. And I watched as a kid, was a huge, huge fan, went away for it for years and years and years. I actually probably watched during the NWO when TNT was a true competitor there for WWE, that period of time. But I've come back to it a little bit because it is not sport, but sport entertainment enterprise that I think is so perfectly suited to this new world. Like the content that is coming out of wrestling these days, whether it was the Andre the Giant doc on HBO, which was incredible, this 6-part Mr. McMahon Netflix series, which was really good, the A&E biographies, which have been really raw on guys like the Ultimate Warrior and Lex Luger and Randy Savage, the Dark Side of the Ring documentary series, it has been really compelling content that has come out of wrestling.
And you know what else, Matty? Some great books, like Mick Foley's books. When he wrote them himself, and Copeland's book, which did really well, that he wrote himself. He's a huge reader, by the way. The guy reads a book a week. Like, he's a really interesting dude that way. But you're right. There's a lot of stuff around wrestling, different kinds of, content, examinations of it. Some of it investigative stuff, like you said, and some of it, I like Foley stuff is really kind of, drills down into the A, the performance, but B, also kind of the psyche of a guy who, beat himself up terribly in the ring to make people, to amuse people. I think that all those kind of examinations of the business and the culture, I'm with you. I'm really tuned into it.
I've even dropped in on Jim Cornette and Jim Ross's podcasts, and they're amazing because they're just so bloody honest. Like, they spare nothing in terms of the storytelling backstage and behind the scenes of all these different, big matches, big cards, big moments in the history of wrestling. We got a clip here. Here's Stephen Brunt and Up Close talking to Adam Copeland, Edge, about life on the road.
Reason that for some guys that road life has been really destructive, right?
I think so.
Yeah.
I think so.
Like, there's some demons there, right?
I think so. And I think anytime you're on the road that much, and I think back to the schedule, even in the 90s when I came in, it was hard. It was a grind, man. And no kids.
Yeah.
So it's easier. But I'd see guys and girls with kids. There's no cell phones then, so you look back at the dudes in the 80s, and I remember talking to Hogan once, and he goes, I think my longest time on the road was 69 days straight. There's no tour bus. There's no, team plane. You're an independent contractor. You get a rental car, you hop in it, and you get yourself to the next town. You get your meals. You find your gym. You do all of those things. So you're your own manager, your own agent probably. You're all of these things. Now you're on the road 69 days in a row. You got a family at home. There's no cell phone, so you got to wait till you get to the hotel, probably at $5 a minute at that point, calling home. Chances are there's going to be some cracks.
Yeah.
That even if they don't show right away are eventually going to show. And it's an amazing gig, but it's a tough one. There's no way around it. You walk around for the rest of your life knowing you're going to be sore every day.
They've got cell phones now, Stephen, but
And of course, if you're Ric Flair, you drink 20 beers after every.
There is that.
There's that as well.
But correct me if I'm wrong. I mean, the economics of this is still, even to this day, I think, the guys at the very tippity top do very well. But I mean, it's still not a super glamorous life, even for the guys midway up the ticket, is it?
There aren't, I guess the one thing is there aren't as many of the old house shows as they used to do, right? So these guys would do TV tapings on the weekend or a big show on the weekend, and then they would go out and do all these untelevised house shows, and they'd be working 5-6 days a week sometimes. A lot of that stuff's gone. So, those kind of smaller live shows, so that, takes some of the heat off, but also, that means fewer paydays for the guys that you're talking about at the, kind of the bottom end of that, at that.
Maybe a little less wear and tear on the body, though, too, which is good because we know that has taken a toll on many of them as well.
It certainly has. And they, they've cleaned some stuff up. Like I think by and large they've cleaned up. The steroid stuff has been pretty cleaned up there. There's also more of a kind of an acceptance of guys with more normal looking bodies. You don't see the kind of guys you saw in the 80s and the 90s who clearly were, roided out of their minds. There's a lot of, it's a different aesthetic now. And, different guys running the business, right? Like it's not McMahon anymore. He's gone. Adam works for AEW, which is Tony Khan, the Khan family, the same guys who own the Jacksonville Jaguars, right? And Fulham. So, there's a different kind of, there aren't as many guys, I think, who, on the business side who date back to the, those really exploitive old times when, when it really did, they broke some of these guys. Like, the stories, the horror stories about some of the guys who didn't survive.
Yeah, which is why I was so disappointed that they brought Hogan out for the first Netflix show, and actually pleased with the crowd reaction that we're beyond this now. But what do you think in a post McMahon world where they're on Netflix? What's your prescription for at least WWE, if not the entire pro wrestling business?
Well, Matt, I can think about this how it's cycled through my whole life, right? It's kind of peaks and valleys, but it never goes away. Like I remember when I was at Sportsnet and they had WWE for a long time. Like there's a baseline rating that it doesn't matter. If you put wrestling on television on one of your channels, X 100,000 people will watch it every time you put it on. That there is a hardcore audience, and it spiked during the Saturday Night Main Event years, right, on NBC when it came on instead of Saturday Night Live once a month. And that, during the kind of Hogan peak, it's again and then it's had valleys for sure, but there's again culturally you can there's an interesting. I remember a million years ago when I was at the Globe, I covered the meeting of the Society for the Study of Popular Culture in Toronto, an academic crowd. And I ended up sitting down with 4 people who had written academic papers about professional wrestling. It was fantastic, and and at that point it was a lot of, angry flag waving Americans going against the Iron Sheik and stuff. So it was all kind of in the political zeitgeist at that point. But it's even when that's not kind of the deal, or when it's not, they went through the extreme kind of era with WWE as well. You've had competition between different companies, but it never goes away, right? Like it taps into something, and doesn't matter. You don't have to believe it's real. You don't need necessarily a Rock or a Hogan or a Cena or one of those guys who kind of is bigger than the sport itself. It plays to something, and it's not. It plays across a large demographic. Like you tell me who's a wrestling fan. There's a lot of different people.
Well, you'll be surprised.
I mean, there's a lot. If there's a line you want to know about the culture, watch wrestling. And I gotta say, Blake, I've known this guy for 25 years, considering a friend, a mentor. We worked on the same newspaper for a number of years.
You didn't know?
This is the first time that I've become aware that Steve Brunt is a wrestling fan. So, author, CBC News, CBC Radio regular. Before anyone goes making Brunt a Laurentian elite, here he is at the wrestling match.
I think the Laurentian elite are watching this stuff too, Matt. I think that they're all quietly, secretly watching it.
Multiple times a year, be a social or whatever, I have that moment of, I can't believe that person is tweeting about wrestling right now. I
told you when I saw Saturday night's main event was back a few weeks ago for the first time in 17 years. I was there. I was hooked for the entire show.
Wow.
So the series is up close. The next episode with Adam Copeland, a.k.a. Edge, the audio podcast is out. The video YouTube side is dropping imminently. And I can't wait to see who you have for guest number 3.
Me too.
I'm going to guess somewhere in the middle between Pelly and Edge.
That's a pretty wide middle, my friend. Yeah, I can almost guarantee that.
It sure is. Thanks for this. Thanks for the time, Steve.
All right,
appreciate
thanks,
this.
See ya.
If you are struggling with things like managing stress, anxiety, relationships, or divorce, reach out to the counselors at Advanced Counseling. Book your free initial consultation today at advancedcounseling.ca.
Carson Price from the Historic Wall Center. This next segment brought to you by Ben Moss, with a history dating back more than 100 years, a proudly Canadian-owned and operated company. 5 locations here in BC: Abbotsford, Chilliwack, Victoria, Willowbrook, and Langley. Coquitlam Center, committed to customer satisfaction. Check out the large selection of Canadian mined diamonds, lab-grown diamonds. They've got mined diamonds with payment plans to suit your needs. For more info, check out benmoss.com. Ben Moss, shine bright. As we welcome in former Vancouver Canuck and TSN hockey analyst Frank Corrado. He had the intermissions last night on the regional Jets,
which means
telecast.
You had to watch every minute of that game, unlike us.
So you would think. Fake
it till you make it.
Yeah, two very different broadcasts last night. Like I didn't see the Canucks show, but I could tell you what the Jets show was saying. Whoo boy, was that dominant, start to finish.
Yeah,
didn't even let him into the game. Wow.
So give us your assessment of the Canucks.
I said it in the pregame show. So we do a 30-minute pregame show at that Jets regional. And I said there's a very good chance that with the way this road trip has gone for Vancouver, all the noise around this team, it's their last game of the trip. There's a chance they have one foot on the plane ready to go home. And Winnipeg is going to have to push that other foot onto the plane. And it didn't take long for that to happen. Like it almost had the feeling of a controlled scrimmage, where like it was Winnipeg just out there, and there was a token team just playing against them. Hey, go in this situation, do this. That's how it felt. It felt like a controlled
Washington
scrimmage.
Generals. the Harlem Globetrotters.
And I'm not
against the Generals.
I'm not trying to be a smartass. I'm really not trying to be a smartass. And it's been a long road trip, and it has, there's been a lot of noise around the team, and I very sensitive to all that because I've been in those situations, and it sucks and it's hard to get through, but that's the reality of what that game was like last night. It was just one foot on the plane, felt like a controlled scrimmage, and at no point did you ever feel like Vancouver had any fight in them in that game.
And there's been almost, I think, in my opinion, zero. He's had a couple of multiple goals against games, Kevin Lankinen, but there's been 0 times where I thought he cost them the game. Do those first 2 goals, certainly 3 of the first 4 and 4 of the first 5. I mean, there's a lot of fault there on Kevin Lankinen. They weren't great, but does that sink a team when they see that the guy that has saved their bacon becomes so fallible in one night?
I kind of think, Blake, you can only ask so much of the guy. Like the first one, sure, I'll give you that one. He plays it on his forehand. Velarde reads it perfectly, but the other one, like Kyle Connor's going to the net. Now Jolson has to make a decision. Like who am I going at here? And ultimately Connor's the one who scores it. And then the breakaway, the Kyle Connor breakaway, I can't fault him on that. Like this is
not on that.
The guy's
one.
got
That's
26 goals now. Yeah, he's got 26 goals now. He's quietly one of the best goal scorers in the NHL. And you gave him, as a team, 3 glorious chances. Like I'm sorry, like I think the first one for sure, but after that, it's like he needs a little help in front of him, and he didn't get that on the second, and he definitely didn't get that on the third one. Like that's one of those ones where you need a forward to cover up for the D-man. Like the guys call it a 200-foot game for a reason, because the forward in that situation, who was JT Miller, has to skate 200 feet back to his own net. Like that's the definition of not being 200 feet right there. If you're just kind of coasting and then you let the guy skate past you, it's one play. Not going to go crazy about it, but that's what makes 200-foot players 200-foot players. They skate all the way back.
It's one play, but I can't remember a block of games where JT has looked just so disengaged. When you go back to the no-show in Carolina on Friday, Toronto on Saturday, he wasn't exact.
And coach concurs clearly.
And the minutes are dropping here. A player with that kind of fire, how do you even begin to start motivating them, right? Like,
you have to direct that fire in the right place, whether it's the player who does that or the coach who steps in and has a say in how that's done. But that fire is what made JT Miller so good last season. And it's why a lot of people talked about the Canucks as this dual threat down the middle of the ice with a guy who can play against anyone and is, hard to play, all that kind of stuff. But when that fire kind of gets misplaced, and whether that's him or whatever's been going on with the team, like a lot of that has to fall on him. Ultimately, he's the guy. Like you're responsible for your own play. So that's where Rick Tocchet has to kind of put on his Rick Tocchet hat that made him so effective as an assistant in Pittsburgh with Kessel and Malkin and all those guys. Like, I don't know. There's something has to give as far as how his play has been and that kind of fire and all that kind of stuff. But you're right. It's night and day different, from last year to this year.
Well, he's got to be injured, no? Like how does the guy who was one of the key leaders of this team, who on almost a nightly basis said, "Follow me, I'll drag you guys there." How does it become this unless he's injured? And if he's not injured, holy cow, what a problem.
That's the most logical explanation. It's also the most logical explanation to when Pettersson, has had his issues this year. Like, it's just when you're a guy that's relied upon that much and you can't play at 100%, and then, you're also playing against difficult, matchups all the time. It's the reality. Like, not everyone, there's a handful of guys, or maybe a little more than a handful of guys, a dozen guys that can do that kind of stuff at 85% or 80%. It's just like it's not something that really can happen for a lot of these guys. So that's the most logical explanation. And also, which game was it? Was it the Washington game where he took that hit and he was really laboring, like he kind of had the shoulder to the ear, he went back to the bench? That was concerning as well. I know he didn't necessarily leave. There's plenty that makes you concerned about, the star guys on this team. And if the star guys on the team aren't doing it, like you're going to have a hard time, like come playoff, like as we talk about the playoffs, it's going to be difficult for these guys to keep treading water without the big boys kind of doing thing.
Brilliant segue, Frank. That was my next question. Is this team better than Calgary and St. Louis? Are you confident that they will make the playoffs in what's shaping up to be a 3-team derby? Maybe Utah gets back involved because they got some pieces to trade and they're getting healthier. But, Canucks versus the field here for that second wild card. Are you confident that they're better and are going to make the playoffs?
I'm not, given the way that they've played. Like, I think on paper, you'd look at it and say they shouldn't be in this situation. They're the logical choice to make the playoffs out of all those teams. But for me, Calgary is the team that maybe stands out above the three, where it's like they have a really good thing going right now. And they have some injuries, like Zari's hurt. Mantha got hurt earlier in the year. He's not coming back. He had the ACL. So, like, they've had, they've had their stuff to get over, their adversity. And they're different than the Canucks because they're kind of this cohesive group that seems like they all believe in things. Huberdeau's been a great story. Nazem Kadri's been a nice story. The goaltender, Dustin Wolf, has been, given an opportunity now and has a good chance to, he's going to be in the Calder conversation. So, like, Calgary seems like it's, rainbows and sunshine, and Vancouver seems like it's the dark rain that oftentimes is in the city. It feels like it's following the team. So, and St. Louis is right there with Calgary. I don't think Utah. I think Utah's got a ways to go. Just they're pretty leaky defensively, and so I wouldn't have them in the tier of those teams. But like, if you're asking me if it's Calgary or Vancouver right now, I get a way better feeling from Calgary than I do around the Canucks.
My team Hockey, the two Goudreau teams are exceeding everybody's expectations and then some in Columbus and Calgary. You wonder if there's some inspiration there too from the start of the season.
The Columbus thing is crazy. They're like the cardiac kids, and they're like, this is why you can't make the excuse of injuries, because they're missing guys like they've missed Goodbranson, Jenner. I think Chinakhov has been out for a while. Danforth has been out for a while. Sean Monahan's not playing, and he's going to be out for a little while longer. Like, take away 5 guys that are the guts.
And they're not even good to begin with.
Team.
And they're missing those 5 guys.
Right. But you know what they have going for them? Zach Werenski is in the conversation with Quinn Hughes for, the best defenseman in the NHL. I truly believe that. Quinn is unbelievable. Zach Werenski is right there this season. Sillinger and Kent Johnson have really taken nice steps this year, which needed to happen for them. And Marchenko, who was good to begin with, has really taken another step. Like, he's more rounded of a player, and the guy he plays with, Voronkov, has had a nice thing going as well. And they're doing it with, like, they've played the crap out of Merzlikins, who I'm not even sure like he can handle that. And they haven't been playing Tarasov. They finally played him last night. They've been calling up Jet Greaves from the minors to play. So it's kind of weird how Columbus has done it. They score a lot, they give up a lot. Like, they are the cardiac kids. They're pretty. It's pretty exciting hockey. It's actually the complete opposite of watching Canucks hockey right now, where Columbus is very exciting and Vancouver's not that.
So much.
It's not exciting hockey. It's not.
No,
Sorry.
No. So okay. So we've talked. We've talked a lot about low event hockey. We've talked a lot about how they are bereft of any kind of rush, transition, chance ability. We have talked mostly about the Redwoods and the lack of puck transportation on the defensive side of the offensive side of the ledger. But Frank, Tocchet mentioned the Jets' speed pregame. He mentioned the Jets' speed postgame. They have trailed 6-0 twice this season to the Winnipeg Jets, who can really skate, and the New Jersey Devils, who can really skate. And that's been a theme against the Devils for several years now. They just haven't been able to match pace. How big a deficiency is Vancouver's lack of speed? Like, is it a fatal flaw? And are there going to be matchups around the National Hockey League like Winnipeg and New Jersey where they just seemingly is so exposed?
I guess, like, the thing with speed is there's a lot of guys that can skate fast in the league. It's just, what do you do with it? Like, do you move the puck fast? Do you anticipate for your teammates fast? Like, that's kind of where I go with speed. I don't necessarily categorize it all the same. And I can tell you for free that on the Jets regional first intermission last night, that's what we were talking about. Like, I did a pack on Winnipeg speed and how Vancouver couldn't handle it because it was very evident in that game. So I think, a lot of that comes down to, yes, you do need to have the players that are fast, but go through the list of guys, that you have. Pettersson's not really fast. Brock Besser's not really fast. JT Miller is not playing overly fast. DeBrusk he's not fast, in the grand scope of the league, right? So, like, all of a sudden now, I'm pretty deep into your top 6, and I'm like, who's your burners there? And you passed on speed. You had Lafferty, you had Mikheyev, and hey, you're gone. You're done with them. That's fine. Those guys couldn't score, and the team needed to score more this year. So you brought in DeBrusk. Maybe Heinen was going to give you more scoring punch. I can reason with that. But if you're not going to have the burners, like Matt said, or it's just like, or Blake said, you need to have a plan in place where everyone can look fast. And I think that's what Tocchet has tried to do this year. With the way they want to, slash players through the middle of the ice and, push pucks into the neutral zone and have that second wave of defense, jumping up. But on a night like last night, where you get to see Connor and Ehlers and Lowry and all those guys, you're like, there's a difference. Like, there's a difference between wanting to play fast and scheming it out as a team and the guys that are the thoroughbreds. And Winnipeg has a few of those guys last night.
Well, Frank, what they've lacked is anybody not named Quinn Hughes getting a pass to a forward at full speed. They've got one player that can make that pass. And so if you're not fast, the best thing you could do, as you just outlined, is have your guys at their top speed coming at a pretty stationary defense on the other team. But if you don't have somebody providing those passes to those forwards at full speed, it's not going to work.
It gets bogged down a lot right now with Vancouver. And like Quinn Hughes is the 1A category of defenseman. They're lucky to have him, but the drop off from when he is on the bench, when he is on the ice to when he is on the bench, it can't be that significant. Like it has to be a little less steep of a drop off, but that's the reality of what it is right now. And I think when you have, like, if you want to have the big guys on the back end that don't move it as good, you almost have to take up the Carolina model, where it's like we have all these big, fast, meaty forwards where we know, Carolina's got puck movers, so I'm not gonna say they don't, but the way they play, it's like we know if we punt it or go glassing out or the high flips, we know we got foot races that we're gonna win, or we know we're gonna turn that into forechecks. And the Canucks don't have that either. So a lot of that falls onto the shoulders of Quinn Hughes. I think now more than talking me into this for a while now. I think now more than ever is the time where Hronek probably needs his own pair. You just like it's too drastic. It's too drastic from when Hughes is on the ice to when Hughes is on the bench. They have to do it, and it's at an
And what you said is also why they don't win their dump and chases. They play dump and chase so often, but they don't get there fast enough to put the pressure on the defenders. And so much of the dump and chase is the other team just picks up the puck and turns the other way, and you don't win the puck back, and it's sort of pointless to play dump and chase at that point.
Yeah, well, last night, Winnipeg did a good job breaking it out. Lowry was back. He cross-checked someone. Next thing you know, Sandberg's got it, and it's gone. It didn't spend a lot of time in Winnipeg zone.
That Lowry line is fantastic. Like last year, we talked about Bluger, Joshua, and Garland being amongst the best third lines in hockey, and the Winnipeg third line was cited a lot. But boy, they've got size. They can play skill. They got a lot going for them. That's a heck of a hockey team. Frank, outstanding work again. Thank you for the time, and we will catch up next Wednesday.
Okay, boys. Thank you.
If you are struggling with things like managing stress, anxiety, relationships, or divorce, reach out to the counselors at Advanced Counseling. Book your free initial consultation today at advancedcounseling.ca.
Secure some price from the historic Wall Center. Where? Extend your game night with a staycation here in downtown Vancouver. Book a Securison Price exclusive rate here at the Wall Center. Call 604-331-1000. Tell them we sent you, and hopefully a blackout date or doesn't apply, and hopefully they got some availability. And you explore your city downtown here at the Wall.
And hopefully you still want to go to games.
You can text us 778-402-9680. Email live at scaredsandbryce.com. All of the great clips inbox. Great clips.
It's going to be great.
So GM Ryan Rigmaiden says the BC Lions are close to re-signing team most outstanding player, receiver Justin McInnes. The Canadian slot back, as we know, led the Canadian Football League in receiving. Rigmaiden joined a conference call from the league's winter meetings in Charlotte, North Carolina, and that's where his U.S. base is. He's in North Carolina, so kind of like home meetings for him. Quote, "We're in discussions. Things are going really, really well. You saw what he's capable of, so he's been a priority for us. I think Justin wants to be here, which helps. In terms of timeline, don't know if I could give you that, but talks have been very, very good and expect good things moving forward." He is the premier BC Lions free agent. Gary Peters re-signed, who was their best player on defense last year, to get McInnes done in advance of the February 11th CFL free agency deadline would be excellent work, and I think put a lot of minds to ease about that passing game, including Nathan Rourke's. You have a big target like that.
Yeah, I think it would also just be, it would be bad PR. Never mind the football. You have a guy have a transcendent year and you lose him immediately. It wouldn't be awesome.
I mean, he's from Montreal, so oftentimes, as you know, the Canadian free agents in the CFL like to be at home because then you're just financing one residence, not two.
Mm-hmm.
But it would. We also see it in terms of guys become part of their new community. Brian Shue, Vancouver guy, was so prominent in Montreal for all those years. So we'll see what's going on. Football here at home, a little further west. Big news for the UBC Thunderbirds. They have hired former CFL Most Outstanding Player Kahari Jones as the team's new quarterbacks coach. Of course, Kahari, a former BC Lions quarterback and offensive coordinator, and just an outstanding human being. I got a chance to catch up with him at the Grey Cup in November. There are some really lucky quarterbacks and young football players that are going to get Kahari Jones in their life this upcoming season.
So what's the story there? Like, how does a guy with that resume take that job?
Well, I know they love Vancouver as a family.
Okay.
And look, this sometimes happens in the CFL with assistants, right? You bounce around from, and Kahari's had a lot of jobs here. Now, most recently was, where was he most recently, actually? Was it Montreal?
Ottawa,
right.
Yeah.
I mean, just the shuffle of assistant coaches. It happens pretty much every year.
Can I give you an alternate
Please do.
theory?
Please do.
He's a man that loves acting. Does he have dreams of a late surge in his acting career in Hollywood North? We're going to say West. All Hollywoods are West.
What are you thinking? Like a one-man show at the Chan Center or something?
Who knows? I think of the 4 TV movies he's been in, I think my favorite one was him as Policeman 1 in Snow 2, Brain Freeze.
Now, hey, don't sell him short. He did Shakespeare in college.
He did, UC Davis. Yeah.
And this was you had predicted this, but we finally got word that that Vancouver Rise, the new women's soccer team in the Northern Super League, will be calling Swangard Stadium their permanent home.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense. The only thing I've ever really hated about Swangard for the smaller teams, Whitecaps too, parking, sure, but just I hate having the track there. Like, you're farther away from the pitch. Yeah. It's a great, if we could carve up
designed to be a multi-sport stadium.
Yeah. But for a spectator, I wish they were just a little bit closer. That's all.
Poll question results from Tuesday. We asked you, is all well with the Canucks now that Philip Hronek is back? Yes or no? What did the people say?
They said yes.
No, they said no. 76%.
Ooh.
Jeff, they need more pieces on the back end and more speed and skill on the forward lines. This team needs about 3 additions at least. Goldfinger says yes, the team will come together, start heating up, and we will go on a streak. That's Goldfinger. He's got the Midas touch. Toro da Corsa says mostly yes. This wasn't a playoff team before Hronek came here, but this fan base wants to doom and they don't appreciate Hronek enough. Kind of echoing John Shannon, who said didn't think enough had been made of the Hronek injury as a reason why the Canucks are where they are. And then there's Dario, who says not even close. Need 2 playoff-ready defensemen and 2 hard-nosed forwards in order to make anything happen let alone make the playoffs. I don't believe management will be able to achieve that this season. Okay.
They do have that cap space. We'll see when they decide to use it.
Errors and omissions from yesterday's program. I noted one. John Shannon talking about a world where Kevin Lankinen re-signs for $5 million. Wanted to put the Canucks at about 12, 13 million goaltender expenditure next season. It would only be 10.
Mm-hmm.
Demko's on a $5 million. He didn't have Demko's contract in hand. But yeah, pay Lankinen 5, Demko 5, that's 10. Anything to report on your end?
All clear
All right.
today.
Thanks for joining us, everybody. Appreciate you spending some time and connecting with us. Please do subscribe to all our assorted channels, YouTube, and wherever you get your podcasts. Follow on social. That's X, Insta, Facebook, TikTok, YouTube, Blue Sky. We are live on many of those platforms, noon Pacific time weekdays, and of course, support the community sponsors you hear us talking about. Keep it local.